Hey everybody, it's Dave Eddy, the Director of Training for the International Homicide Investigators Association. Here in the next in our series of what we now call the Flint to Flame interview series, with compelling stories involving individuals in our line of work in law enforcement, investigations, nonprofits, all kinds of things that you've come to know as part of our interview series to bring attention to not only the work that we do as the IHIA in trying to bring training, education, resources, leadership to investigators across the world, but to give you a glimpse into some of the people that are doing perhaps things that are above and beyond what we might typically think an investigator or an officer or someone in public safety would do in the course of their duties. And I'm really excited and pleased to be talking with today one of those people that does that. And um, Captain Tim Sturm is from the Calaveras County, California Sheriff's Office. And I'm going to let him introduce himself here in just a moment. Tim is involved with many things at Calaveras County, one of those being the Cold Case Task Force. Tim, well, first of all, welcome and thanks for doing this with us. We really appreciate it. And if we could just start things out, maybe if you could just give us a brief background of your law enforcement career to date. Obviously, you're still working, how you got to where you are today as captain of the Operations Bureau, overseeing several different units and teams. If you could just tell us a little about yourself, where you came from, how you got there, and then we'll kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the questions I have for you about this unique thing that you're doing on the side.
Sure. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Tim Sturm, and I am captain with the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office. I have worked for this Sheriff's Office for about 26 years. This has been the one agency I've worked for. I did have time as a volunteer, actually as a teenager with a different agency as a volunteer growing up, but transitioned couple counties over and have ended up here in Calaveras County. My career, I've been very fortunate where I've spent about 16 years of my overall career in investigations units. And, of course, have worked a handful of years on patrol and other duties, as probably most people have. But today I'm the operations captain. And as you mentioned, amongst other duties, I am the Cold Case Task Force Unit Leader.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And as I've come to experience in my own career, people that get to the level that you're operating at right now, it's not typically by accident, and they've had to have touched many different areas of the public safety and law enforcement profession, and bring a breadth of experience, which I know that the citizens appreciate, and I know that your colleagues no doubt appreciate. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about some of the victims of crime who certainly will appreciate and benefit, hopefully, from what you do on all levels. Can you tell us a little bit about Calaveras County, kind of where it's situated in California, a little bit of the demographics, maybe about the area, some of the types of crimes that typically your people are faced with and the citizens are faced with in that area?
Absolutely. Calaveras County is a little bit north of Midstate. We're considered Northern California, about 2 hours east of San Francisco. This is foothills to Sierra Nevada. This is California Gold Country.
Okay.
This county has about 6 major reservoirs, and the interesting thing is that it's divided on two sides by major rivers, and about 46,000 people in this county. Around, I guess that the population density, it's not spread throughout the entire county, so over 1,000 square miles. But there's population hubs, which leads to areas where there is not a great population. And as a result of that, we have experienced that this area has in the past been a destination, so to speak, for people who have completed, body dumps, for lack of a better term. The rural nature does potentially make it available to travel to the county and dispose of evidence of a crime. So we have experienced that both on land and in the waterways. And just in general, we're a mid-sized department, but again, we're a very rural county. So there is not a law enforcement officer at every corner. It's not a metropolitan city. It does have rural areas, and I think that has led to some of the unique issues that we're seeing today as related to both crime and especially cold crime.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes complete sense. As you were talking about the kind of remote nature of many parts of the county, and that being an attractive, uh, for lack of a better term, dumping ground and collection point for people to kind of get rid of things and maybe themselves disappear for a while, out of sight and out of mind. It does make me think of some of my experience, and started my career down in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and worked for a uh, Denton PD, which is kind of the north point of the triangle of Denton, Dallas, and Fort Worth. And in the very north part of our jurisdiction, we would routinely find stolen cars, burned out cars, bodies, all that, because it was a remote area and it was far enough removed from the large metropolitan areas that it was they felt a convenient and safe place, and that does kind of make it unique, which intrigues me. Of course, it makes me think of the movies, because you always see bad things happening out in the desert in the movies and out in the no man's land. But what's unique, and one of the reasons that our corporate counsel director Jessica Kung, who kind of helps me with these Flint to Flame interviews, getting them set up, giving me good subjects to and interesting subjects to talk with. Um, the cold case task force as a nonprofit, and I'm excited to hear more about it. I know that we've had an introduction before, and we kind of went through a little bit of this, but I'm excited to hear more about this, because it sounds like a very unique approach to helping fund some of these investigations. And I think most people know, or if they don't know, they should understand that funding is one of the major inhibitors sometimes for an agency to really throw a lot of resources at cold cases in particular. They're so busy dealing with new and fresh and what's happening immediately, that cold cases and sometimes training kind of take a back seat. So can you just tell our listeners, our viewers, about the Calaveras Cold Case Task Force as a nonprofit, and what your organization's mission statement is, and kind of how it came to be?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, much like probably most of the agencies out there, we realized at a certain point that there were cold cases that needed to be brought to the forefront. And I use the term "we" because the process of cold case investigation, it's definitely a team approach. There's not one person out there that's going to do something on their own. They're at least not successfully. But a team of us decided that this is something that needed law enforcement investigative attention. And so we took a look at our existing resources, probably not dissimilar to what other agencies have done. And there was a small amount of funding available to us. And we used that funding for some private lab DNA testing. And basically, we burned through that funding on our first run. And at that point, we said, this simply can't be it. This can't be where this ends. So we put our heads together and said, what can we do now? And it came up to fundraising. And that idea was tossed around, and we really had no expectations. But we held a fundraiser. We put this out to the community, what the approach was and what the purpose was for. So we were very straightforward of we're trying to get funds to do this, is what we told the community, and we were supported in an incredible rate, more than we had ever imagined. So for the first few years, now this was back in about 2020, We actually piggybacked onto a nonprofit that was already existing. It was kind of a boosters organization for the sheriff's office. I think a lot of agencies might have something similar.
Sure.
And most recently in 2024, we were successful enough that we outgrew that and we started our own nonprofit association. So our mission statement is without limitation to solve cold cases. And we used that mission statement because it is broad. Um, there's some technicalities to it. It does allow us to, for example, pay for the routine things like, perhaps a website or the some of the overhead costs because the website attracts people and it also is a platform to collect tips. Um, so that's the mission statement, but we actually have a motto, and the motto is to find the truth. And when we initially were talking about forming a cold case team, that's what each conversation centered around, is that we realized that with each investigation we have to find the truth, whether that is the identification of a suspect or in a unidentified human remains case, just the identification of that victim, but nonetheless the truth. And that's a model that we live by when we assign the cases and when each investigator works their assignments.
Yeah, that's really that's it's well, number one, it's fascinating. Number two, it's inspirational. I mean, the one of the cool things about this interview series that we've kind of embarked upon is that every person that I've talked to so far, and I think we're up to four now, if my math is correct, but every person in my experience of these four interviews and these individuals that we've reached out to and talked with, everybody for the most part, I think, gets into this line of work, into public safety or law enforcement or the first responder professions because they want to make a difference. They want to make the world a better place. They want to, hopefully they have altruistic motives and that's what drives them. Sometimes there's the outlier that is in it for the wrong reasons, and that usually comes out pretty visibly. But the thing that I've noticed in common across the interviews I've done so far is that individuals like you and people that you work with, this team that you mentioned, because you're right, nobody does it alone, is that it's one thing to do your job and do it well, and maybe even do more than what you're expected to do. And I think that's a great work ethic for people to have. They really want to do the best that they can do every day when they come to work, but then to take that and recognize, hey, there's what more can we do? What limitations do we have? How do we overcome those limitations, and how do we tear down some of these obstacles in the way? And this team that you put together and the outside the box thinking is inspirational. I'm just in awe of people like you and those you work with that found this solution. Typically people don't think government agency and nonprofit. They don't typically put those two together. But what a great way to allow people to help, because there are we see a lot of bad in this world, and and the bad sometimes tends to get all the attention. But there's a lot of people out there that would really love to help law enforcement, would love to help investigators solve cases. They want to do the right thing. And in the past, there's been really limited opportunities to do that other than perhaps being a good witness, that kind of stuff. But now to be able to help financially, through monetary donations or making resources available. What a great thing that is. And it's exciting. And I love your I think you said your motto, to find the truth. I've talked to a lot of victims over the years, and there's one of the cliches that a lot of people say is, well, we want to help them find closure. I've talked to a fair number of victims, families and survivors who say, there's not really ever closure, and I'm sure that there's there's some that feel differently. But I've just heard from a lot that, there really isn't, it's kind of a misnomer. There's really not closure. What we really want is the truth. We want to know what happened. We want to know where our loved one is. We want to be able to know the truth. And so what a great motto to find the truth. Just inspirational. I'm so glad that you've shared that with us, and it it prompts me to a couple more questions here. Um, can you give us some idea, some numbers that capture the outcome of the task force operation since it was established? Do you have metrics or data that you collect to kind of measure? It's difficult to measure success, especially when you're talking about cold cases. But do you have any kind of um, you know uh, numbers or data that reveals kind of the outcome, how this has helped you with your cold case endeavors?
Sure, sure. Actually, as a cold case team, we became involved in National Cold Case Month, which was actually put together by the person whom you interviewed in the last episode, Aaron.
Right.
And when we broadcasted our Cold Case Month for October, we used our social media platforms from the agency, the law enforcement agency, and it was amazing how the public followed this. As you said, the public wants to help. If the public has information, they want to provide it. And so, as a result of that campaign, just from the National Cold Case Month, we received over 42 useful tips. Now, this was amongst a couple hundred communications, is the way we categorize those. And some of the communications were I broadly know something or I heard, and we narrowed those down to about 42 tips that are what we would call workable. As far as progress on unidentified human remains, now this county has a rather unique situation where we started the cold case task force knowing that in the town where our sheriff's office is located, there was a crypt, which was the result of a crime that was committed by two people back in the 80s. And this crypt contained unidentified human remains. And essentially, at the conclusion of the case, DNA technology wasn't then what it is today. And we believed, although we didn't know at that point, that DNA technology might be able to identify some of those remains, and we would be able to give them a proper burial and return them to their family, and perhaps in some cases identify people who had been previously unidentified. In other words, maybe identify people who had been victims of that crime spree that weren't previously known. So of those remains, which started at over 1,000 pieces of human remains, we have sent through for testing over 200. And from those 200, there has been DNA extracted from 20 samples. Now, understand that these remains, they are degraded. They're in some cases burned. There are environmental factors, of course, from being stored in a crypt. But of those, the 20 that have produced DNA, we've identified 4 people.
Wow.
On a separate case, we have successfully had DNA extracted where it hadn't been before. This was a case where one of the waterways that divides our county and the next, there was a female who was thrown off a bridge. She remained underwater for some time. She was submerged with a heavy object until drought, and then her remains were recovered. A lot of work went into that case using conventional technology, and then the cold case task force took a look at it, and using private laboratories, there was eventually SNP DNA recovered, and that case is currently assigned to genealogy with our forensic investigative genetic genealogist team. They're working on it as we speak. So that's just a snapshot of where we are. There is an additional Jane Doe and John Doe profile, which is assigned out to genealogy. But having said all that, that has consumed about $200,000 of donated funds. And I mentioned before that the agency had allocated a small amount of funding when we first got started as a cold case unit. Uh, that amount of funding wasn't anywhere near 200,000. This agency, and I would suspect most agencies, don't have a line item for this type of work. So if not for the public support, none of that would have occurred. We essentially would have been at a stopping point when we were out of funding at our first attempt. And during the first attempt, it was really an eye opener that, first of all, we didn't know how fast we would go through that money because we didn't know how expensive things were. Uh, um, but secondly, we just quite frankly, it was a learning curve of what's out there for technology, who's willing to help, but ultimately what it's going to cost. Because all these the private partners and all the labs absolutely respect their rates. They have high overhead, and for our victims, we want the best people, we want the best equipment, and I think agencies are ultimately going to have to pay for that. Which is why we found a way to raise these funds and use them directly for this purpose.
Yeah, that's so many great points in there. And not just about the funding, but finding the truth, to have that amount of evidence and potential victims or at least unidentified human remains, and to be able to take all that, kind of put it all together, pull out what you can of value, and then to have already, because you haven't been doing this an awful long time, right? Already to have identified four previously unidentified. If you extrapolate that out over time, and you consider the families, the loved ones who've gone without answers, perhaps on some of these things for years, even decades. What a great thing, and what a great direction that it's going. And like you said, you don't do it without the public's help. I know that, and I'm not sure. Maybe the this will come up in our last few questions here, but I know that part of how you raise money, you have a fundraising event. Matter of fact, that's what when my colleague Jessica first brought this to me and said, "Hey, I think we should talk to Captain Sturm." She had attended one of your fundraisers, I think, and I think it's some sort of a gala event, right? People get dressed up, they go and they have a nice dinner, or maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that, because it will go with this next question. If the folks watching this wanted to contribute or donate, where would they find information on how to do that? Do you have I assume you have a website and you have information. I'd love to come out to Calaveras County and attend your fundraising event. I think that would be spectacular opportunity to just see what you're doing, and then go and spread that word on how maybe generate some ideas from other places. But if people do want to join in this fight, because it is a fight to find the truth. If people want to join in and help you in this fight to find the truth, how could they do that, and where can they find information?
Well, first of all, we would be honored to have you. The fundraiser is held every November, but we do collect donations throughout the year, and we do that through our website, which is www.calaveras.coldcase.org. It is available through search engines. If you just Google Calaveras Cold Case, it does come up as a result, and it'll take you there. It has a summary of some of the open cases, and it does have a platform where folks can submit a donation.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And as a nonprofit, I imagine it's a 501c3 or something similar, where it's a tax deductible donation, and those things. And I know not that there are many other ways that people can help, but I appreciate having that. And we'll include the web address in a link when we post this interview.
Great.
We'll include that for sure. or at least on our website, on the IHIA website. So um, beyond that, so what there has to be in your experience now, you've kind of put this together. You've come up with this idea, this platform, this mechanism for people to help you help others find the truth, and you find the truth. What are some of the biggest lessons learned in operating with this level of funding? And you've kind of mentioned already the one of the big lessons learned is how much it costs to do this incredible work. You know, you touched on investigative genetic genealogy and a complete game changer in investigations and in finding truth. It's just such a powerful tool, and it's really in its infancy right now. But like you said, it costs money to have the equipment and the people and the resources and to do the testing and to find that information and truth. Um, but what are some of the other lessons that you learned in operating at this level of funding and contracting with all the different types of commercial vendors? Because law enforcement is obviously nonprofit by nature, right? We're a governmental agency. We're not about making money, and nonprofits are not either. But we deal with and we have to rely on for-profit companies to help us do our work. So, are there lessons learned in that might help someone else at another agency across the country who might, be looking at ways that they can overcome some of the financial obstacles?
Yes, sure. Resources. So I would just offer that if someone is looking at starting something similar, is use your resources. So the first resource is the public as a financial resource. But when you start dealing, as you mentioned, with a large amount of donated money, there's a huge responsibility that comes with that. And to be real, law enforcement officers, myself, I don't have a background in accounting. Generally, the law enforcement officers that I've run into, they are very skilled at certain things, but often numbers are not one of those things. And by numbers, I mean the essentially high level accounting. So I would encourage people to look what else is out there as far as your resources. There are people who have jobs where they manage money every day. And those people are just like anybody else. And often they're willing to help. And so we found those people. We found somebody who manages money for a living and was a great fit for a treasurer. As far as the composition of a board, basically an advisory committee, I would say also look at what's out there for resources. Look beyond what, at least in this agency, we call sworn officers. So you have sworn and non-sworn, and then there's clerical.
Right.
Don't get stuck on the concept of a team has to be sworn officers. There's a lot of talent out there. Often your clerical staff, in this case, start talking to clerical staff and find out that one of them has a bachelor's degree in anthropology. Well, hey, that's a great fit when we start talking about the triage of what do we send next? What's the priority of what are we going to send in for testing? Because again, we're accountable for every dollar that's spent, and we have to have a system. There's experts in every community. There's dentists that might have a background in some sort of forensic odontology, but there's prosecutors, either active or retired, that may have encountered cases that are willing to help out on things like this because people want to help, as you said before. Often, conventional law enforcement, and you captured it pretty well. You're an eyewitness, and that's how you help law enforcement. In this case, I would strongly suggest that your resources include the people who are the experts in this industry, and build your team around that. Let those people be on your team, and you'll end up with a really broad team of expertise. And You're probably not going to find that if you only look to the sworn members of your agency. If you only go to your detective division and say, who wants to be on a cold case team? I mean, that's great. Do that. Get all those people, get their interest. Uh, um, there's a lot of motivated sworn employees, but look well beyond that. Use your community, use those community resources. And I think that has been the path to our success.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Tim. So much wisdom in that, and I mean, talk about not just in relation to this, but a convenient leadership lesson for any profession or any vocation, right? Surround yourself with excellent people and make sure that it's a diverse group of people, so that you're not all thinking the same way, and you're challenging one another, and you are leveraging those resources. You captured it so well. I appreciate that, and it's a great model for success. It's a great leadership model. It's a great business model, and certainly a nonprofit model. I know being involved in a couple different nonprofits over the years, IHIA being one as well. There are requirements for a board of directors and different things that the state and the federal government require. So by the nature of them, there's supposed to be some built-in oversight. But for your organization to really take a keen eye and look at who can really not only just sit on the board and vote accordingly or make good decisions. You really looked at, hey, how can we leverage the expertise of a variety of people and apply that to a successful you know, nonprofit where we're finding the truth and we're helping people. What a great way to do it. So we've talked about the nonprofit status and the unique nature of that, and kind of connected with a governmental organization. So starting a nonprofit and a cross-agency task force, keeping up with all the operational work of the nonprofit, not to mention, this is in addition to your normal day-to-day duties and all the things that are involved in a public safety career and an investigative career, all the different things, especially at your level, like a captain over multiple units and sections, keeping all that together. Can you, kind of contrast that with the number of cold cases that you're able to, at least bring attention to, if not solve, which I know is the goal, to find the truth and solve those, and bringing truth and perhaps some resolution to victims and families of victims, and other residents of Calaveras County. Um, that's awesome that you've been able to undertake that in addition to all of your regular duties. So how would you encourage other law enforcement officers, other law enforcement professionals, investigators, command level, decision makers, policymakers? How would you encourage them to get to know what they can be doing different? I mean, I think IGG, for instance, is getting a lot of attention right now, but I'm kind of astonished to know that there are still a lot of investigators in particular that don't understand the power of forensic investigative genetic genealogy or other novel investigative techniques, including what you've done. Not really an investigative technique, but uh, a step in that direction with providing the funding, right? So, how could you encourage other law enforcement and command officers and policymakers about what you're doing and these techniques and how to overcome those hurdles and in particular the funding piece?
Well, I've been very fortunate that I work in the sheriff's department, so our sheriff is elected, and I've been very fortunate that she has been entirely supportive of this team and of this project. And I think it starts there. You have to have agency support. For me, this is a collateral duty, and ultimately, that doesn't mean that I don't conduct cold case work, during my regular time, but I still have my day job, and so you have to have administration. You have to have bosses that are going to allow for that to occur. And I think for the agencies that maybe have administration that isn't entirely familiar with the IGG, as you mentioned, it starts with educating yourself, and that was a curve for us. I don't have a problem admitting that. At that point, I was over 20 years on the job, and um, I had a lot to learn as far as the forensic side of these investigations go. Sometimes, depending on if you have an in-house lab or if you're going with maybe the state labs, my my training was that the lab folks, they did their thing. They'd come in, they'd testify to it, and then you did cop work, and ultimately that's who did it. That's who your suspect was. Um, but in the forensic cold case work, you have to have a good understanding of it. And so I think it starts with educating yourself and educating your team, and then talking to your leadership about how this works. It's a great time to be a cold case investigator because of all this technology that's out there. And I think that with proper understanding, most administrators would have a hard time not not supporting something like this. There's always the financial aspect, and that's very real and that's very reasonable. So there has to be a balance on your team of doing the work on your regular time, watching the overtime budget, and in our case, we don't have those hard costs because the public is paying for those. But I think that's a good trade, and the public support is going to lead ultimately to your success. And agencies obviously want to help victims. They want to help the community. And so I think that this big partnership of the agency, the community, and then overall just the support that it provides to victims and their families, that it's a win-win. So for the agencies that are exploring something like this, I would say try it. Try it. Start looking out there for your team. Look for your experts, as I've mentioned before. Look far. Look beyond your department, and then pick a case or two. Explore who's out there for funding. I'd venture to say that almost every community has people who are willing to donate to something like this. Again, as we've said before, people want to help law enforcement. People want to help an investigation move forward. In our case, it's been very beneficial to us to be able to go to people for donations and explain this is specifically for cold case work because it's prominent in the headlines. Generally, the public knows that it's successful. And I think that having those people in place where you can later show your financial reports and show that 100% of that money is going exactly where it's supposed to go is huge. So back to your question, I would say just get started, put something together, try it, but spend some time selecting your team. I assure you, as I've said before, that it does require a team approach. And there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of different tasks amongst that team. There's a lot of hands that are touching each investigation, and with that team, it will get done. And so I would say just get started on it, educate yourself, read about it, educate the people who are who you need to influence on that, and give it a try.
Yeah, such great points. And I love that, and I love that. You talked about it starts with educating yourself. Most things in life, issues we're having in interpersonal relationships or whatever it is, most things start with by looking in the mirror and saying, hey, what do I need to do different? What can I do to help this situation? And so to be inwardly focused like that, in the right way, not inwardly focused in the wrong way, but to say, hey, look, let me educate myself on this. I don't really understand all this IGG stuff. I don't really understand all this. You can bet that there were a lot of people and I was in investigations for a long time, and in police work a long time before that. And there was I was ignorant to a lot of things, a lot of the scientific advancements and things that were going on, because I was just out there trying to do my job and do it the best I could and come home every night. And to recognize, hey, let me read up a little bit more about this. As a matter of fact, the very first Flint to Flame interview that we did was with Martin Engard, and he was forbidden from doing anything to do with public policy change, and that as in his law enforcement role in Denmark. So he stepped out of that role, and as a private citizen pushed forward initiative to have this looked at by the parliament and the different things. And it was very enlightening and educational for me to understand, and quite frankly, inspirational. And much like your situation is, to recognize, hey, it starts with me. What can I do to help this situation? How can I make a difference in this? And when we're focused in that right direction, I think it's just the ability to be successful and make good things happen and make the world a better place are really limitless. So I love everything that you said there. Was just spot on. And having that team, historically, sadly, we in law enforcement have sometimes been a little proprietary, especially in investigations. We sink our teeth into a good, challenging investigation, and we want to find the truth. And sometimes we can get a little bit, uh, um, um, focused on finding that truth, and doing that on our own, and it just doesn't work that way. The chances of success are greatly decreased when we take that approach. But taking the approach that you've done, the Calaveras County Cold Case Task Force has done, involving citizens, it's like the next generation of community oriented policing, right? You're getting the public involved and taking some ownership, and hey, let's work in this together and make this work and find the answers that we need to find together. And that's just so powerful. So we'll wrap up this interview series, Captain, with one kind of final question. Can you tell our audience about the latest development in a case that got some media attention, I think recently, and that the task force was able to help fund it? I'd heard that there was perhaps a serial killer involved in that. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of wrap this up in a nice package and send it out.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, when the cold case was started, there were remains that were associated with crimes committed in the 1980s. And in this case, the crypt that I mentioned, that's not where the remains that led to this discovery were. The remains in question were possession of the coroner as a John Doe since 1986, in fact. And investigators at the time had done an excellent job using every bit of technology that was available from the mid 80s up until the early 90s, composite sketches, DNA work as they could. And it did not produce an identity on this person. So state labs did testing. There was a profile entered into CODIS, no match. With the funding that we had, we were able to send a portion of the remains out for SNP testing, and that was successful. And profile that was suitable for genealogy was created. Sent it over for the IGG, and within 24 hours, got a call. And of course, from there, that led to the hands-on investigation. The team started making their calls, and ultimately discovered a family who had not been in contact with their relative since about 1984. And ultimately, through the cooperation of several agencies across the United States, with some family reference samples collected, we were able to determine that our John Doe was a person whose name is Reginald Frisbee. And Mr. Frisbee had not been reported missing. Ultimately, it was one of those situations where the family now knows that Reggie didn't take off on the family. He unfortunately was a victim in the mid 80s. But now he's identified. They know um, essentially what happened to him, and we're in the process of returning him home.
Hmm.
So yes, this is a serial killer case. The cold case task force is using the no notoriety model. So I'm not going to be giving you any names today, or even those names don't usually come out of any of our mouths. But it did result from a serial killer case, and it did make headlines. Um, Ultimately, though, it was a success. It was a success because without any of the funding, none of the private testing, none of the genealogy work would have occurred, and Mr. Frisbee would still, as we speak, be a John Doe in the custody of the county coroner. I suspect a lot of counties may have cases such as that, where with funding in place, more could be done. And in our case, we're just absolutely fortunate to have the ability to make this happen.
Yeah, that's just so incredible to to realize what you're able to do, what your agency now and your task force is capable of accomplishing with this partnership, with this nonprofit, this unique approach to securing funding. It's just as I've said it a couple of times, so it's inspirational, and I hope that through this. Maybe some of the people, our membership out there, and others who might come across the video on YouTube, or in other places on socials, that they might be inspired to try this. Like you said earlier, just step out and do it. Start start small. Have some small successes. You mentioned that very early in the interview. You just had a fundraiser, and you were using an existing model that you had with kind of a boosters type organization, and then it kind of snowballed from there. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion, on this, and probably why Jessica suggested that we talk, because what a novel approach to securing funding, and especially in the fact that you're a governmental agency, but you found a way to then create a nonprofit where you can accept help from the citizens that want to help, and there are many, and there are just so many different layers to this. I wish we had more time to continue talking about it. I do appreciate your time. So much good has and will continue to come out of what you're doing. And I think that I'm hopeful that others will see that and take a look at how they can then reach out and maybe find a similar, unique, and novel approach to raising funds, or other resources. Maybe there's something else that's that they're able to do outside the avenue that you've taken. But so much good can be done when people set aside the notoriety, right? I love that you have that no notoriety approach, and for those that maybe don't understand what that means, we don't like to. It happens a lot in our the prevalence of school shooters now, and all the different high visibility bad things that happen, not to give that person notoriety, but rather to be victim focused. And I think that this is a perfect model to help visualize that, right? You're victim focused, and in that you're partnering with citizens, you're partnering with other people who want to help. Many of those people probably also have been affected by violent crime at some point, with a loved one or family member. So to take that victim centered approach, and not be concerned about notoriety for yourself as an investigator or as an agency, and certainly not give notoriety to the people out there that are doing bad things, but rather to just find the truth, and remain victim focused, and again, as I like to say, just to do our part to make the world a better place. Captain Tim Sturm, I really appreciate you joining me on Flint to Flame. We'll look forward to staying connected. I would love to come out to your fundraising event, perhaps in next November or this November, I guess it would be called. And I hope I get the chance to do that. But thank you again for your time. Any last questions or comments, or any points that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
It's been an honor, sir. Thank you very much. And if anybody has questions, there have been other agencies that have contacted us. I can provide you my contact information, and we can arrange a contact. I'm happy to individually help whomever might have questions.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. We'll do that. We'll collect all that information and we'll keep it, and we'll know where to point people. And we'll certainly put a link on our website on how to get to you as well. So, again, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for what you're doing. I'm inspired. Every time I do one of these, I think, okay, this is really good information. And then I think, well, here I am again. Now I have another thing on my list that I want to do. So I'm running out of time to do all the things that I want to do, and make a difference like you're making. What great stuff. So thank you so much again for what you do and for taking time to be with us today.
Have a great day, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.